Good morning, beautiful creatives, or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are. This is week 11 of the Artist's Way sequel, Walking in This World. This week we're discovering a sense of authenticity. How did authenticity show up for you this week? In the end, she said, an artist's life is grounded in integrity and the willingness to witness our version of the truth. There are no set markets that assure our safe passage. This week focuses on personal responsibility for our creative caliber and direction. Were you taking personal responsibility this week for your creative caliber and direction? And how are you doing that? Congratulations. Self-respect lies in the doing, not the done. That was self-respect lies in the doing, not the done. I had a day this week where I felt thrown off course because a few different things popped up that were emergencies for other people, and it meant that everything I had planned for my creative career I put on hold. I was going to say had to put on hold. I didn't have to put it on hold. I chose to put it on hold. And then at the end of the day, I was so grumpy because the choices I had made had put other things ahead of, for other people, my creative career. So I had put on hold my creative caliber, the level of my creativity, and I had totally thrown my direction off course. Did you have anything like that happen this week? And I'm grateful this morning that I realize I can't do it for very long because it makes me so crabby. Self-respect lies in the doing, not the done. So once I get back to doing, that self-respect will replace the crabbiness, I'm sure. For this reason, our personal resiliency is key to creative longevity. How personally resilient were you feeling this week? Defeat is transformed into experience by our willingness to start anew. The readings and tasks this week will ask us to practice a beginner's mind, opening ourselves to renewed endeavors despite setbacks. Did you have a beginner's mind this week? Were you willing to start anew this week? She started off this week talking about encouragement. How was your intake of vitamin E encouragement this week? Artists are people, she said, whose quote-unquote real job, no matter what their paying job is the pursuit of excellence by listening carefully and well to what is trying to be born through them. Were you listening well this week? And what is trying to be born through you? Do you know yet? The shape? Or maybe the color? Or just the edge? Artists are not fragile, but we are delicate. We are subject to weather conditions in our lives. Just as a long grey winter spent indoors can cause depression, so too a period where our creative life is led without the sunshine of encouragement can cause a season of despair. Perhaps we do not notice the darkening at first. We just don't feel much like working. Did you feel that this week? And if we are doing the work, it might feel like a long hill we are climbing. And if we mistakenly glance up and see how far we've got to go, oh boy, then we can feel like, I'm never going to get there. Did you feel an attack of the I'm never going to get there's this week? As artists, we routinely tap into an inner well, and that well is fed by our spiritual condition. When we have kept our spirit carefully nurtured, the creative water seems to flow easily. When our spirit is dried out with unacknowledged discouragement, our inner well runs dry. How was your inner well this week? Was it half empty? Was it half full? Was it brimming over? And if it was feeling like it was running dry, did you notice that maybe you had some unacknowledged discouragements there? The antidote to depression is laughter. And this is where we are blessed if some of our friends have a good, bleak sense of humor. Sometimes we can make a phone call that says, I'm torn between suicide and doing my fingernails. Or, I'm torn between making a gratitude list and leaping off a 10-foot building. The uncomfortable fact remains that there is always one positive thing that we could do, even though we may not have the heart to do it. Did you feel like you didn't have the heart to do that one positive thing you could do this week? We have to admit that our discouragement is, as a one-wag once put it, a dirty job, but one that we have volunteered for, damn it. there are some impeccably tried and true cheerer-uppers that most of us are loath to try. For example, it's very difficult to bake a pie and remain suicidal. It's very difficult to send postcards without admiring ourselves just a little for our pluck and valour, even if the card says, "Dear God, I'm having a terrible time and wish you were here to do it with me." It's very hard to be depressed and watch a vintage comedy. It's very hard to be depressed and make vegetable soup. Making almost anything can keep us from making trouble. And since most of us intrinsically know this, we may take to our beds, giving into discouragement and giving it full rein to mug us. Did you give discouragement full rein this week? And how was that for you? If we're in a 12-step program, the dire complaints of newcomers can lighten our despair. There is something very edifying about hearing someone share a truly catastrophic story when we ourselves are worried about something as elusive as inspiration. Reading the hard knock stories of a literary great can cheer up most writers. I remember reading Greta Gerwig saying that she was walking around Los Angeles and she had $97 in her account, and she went and trespassed in the Chateau Marmont because she just got her big breakthrough role in Greenberg, and part of it was going to be set at the chateau. So she went in there and she sat down on a couch and no one bothered her, just to sit and kind of take it in, and she had $97 to her name. She kept the receipt of her $97 in her account because she always kept the receipts of her bank balance when it dipped below $100 and Scotch taped them into a journal as proof that she can always come back, so she kept them every time it went under 100. Knowing that Rodgers and Hammerstein went penthouse to penthouse playing the piano and singing to no good avail to raise funds for Oklahoma can make the doldrums of "I don't feel like writing a song" seem laughable and self-indulgent. She also admits something very healing about giving into a 5-handkerchief storm. It's something about that is very relieving. Did you try that this week? Did you go 5 handkerchiefs? Or there's something very healing about talking to someone very boring because there's something about them launching into talking about something you have zero interest about that makes doing something creative seem more interesting. That, or you could repeat the following: all artists get discouraged. All artists have deep inner wells of self-pity into which we periodically dive. All artists are doing better than someone else and worse than someone else. All artists are doing better today than they have in the past and worse than they will in the future. All artists specialize in self-doubt. It is how we hone the creative imagination. How did that feel for you this week to know that you're not alone when you feel self-doubt? We cannot control everything and everybody in our creative environment. Oh no. We cannot leap across the dinner table and muzzle a fellow guest who casually observes, "At your age, you must be facing the fact that many of your dreams won't come true." Dear God. We cannot, or at least we do not, hire hitmen to take that person out for murdering our hopes. But that is what an offhanded remark can do, especially if we're not alert to flag it as it passes. And we seldom are. Let it go, we may say, only to have it go underground. When it does, it's poison. As artists, we don't want to be petty, but the truth is we need to be. I listened to a really great podcast this week if you are an actor. It's called Audrey Helps Actors, and it's the episode where she talks to an intimacy coach about coaching sex scenes for actors. And they were talking about how women creatives, and maybe all creatives that are very in touch with their feminine side, their response to stress is not fight or flight. It's often to freeze, and you don't know what to do. And if you feel uncomfortable about something someone said or an action someone's taken, often we'll freeze and we feel uncomfortable, and we don't want to make the person who's done it feel uncomfortable, so we do nothing. Or we laugh it off. So I just wanted to put that in there, that if you felt that way at any stage, you're not alone. And that's an awesome podcast to talk about what to do in those sorts of situations. Because when we put those things underground because we feel uncomfortable or we feel hurt and we don't want to make the perpetrator feel uncomfortable, then it goes underground and it does become poison. As artists, we don't want to be petty, but the truth is we need to be. If we try to quote-unquote let go of a creative slight, we often simply bury it. There, tucked neatly in our subconscious, it can do its slow and poisonous work. Too embarrassed to repeat to a friend the tiny comment that hurt you on the way out the door from an audition, it becomes harder to audition next time. Why? Because we have become discouraged. The word courage comes from the root core, which means heart. So courage is heart-filled. Brené Brown talks about living a heart-centered life as being a courageous life. So anything done with great courage is done with great heart. Don't you love that? Julia says, if you have been discouraged, if you check your emotional timbre of your heart, if you feel vaguely blue, a little cross and grumpy, odds are you are disheartened, discouraged, divorced from your heart, discouraged. If you're feeling any of this, it's well worth sleuthing a little bit to assume there's a cause for your discomfort. Instead of saying, I'm crazy, what's the matter with me? Very often, what's the matter is an ignored injury, however slight. A friend asks you to look at your video and then doesn't. Weeks tick past and your filmmaker thinks, oh, what's the use? You write an essay and send it to a colleague and no sound comes back to let you know that the penny dropped in the well, that it has landed. You record a CD and it goes out to your family where it falls evidently on deaf ears. You have dragged home the invisible bone. The trophy of your hard work lies on the floor, unnoticed and unapplauded. This can be very discouraging, and it's okay to feel that way. No big deal, your big adult self says, but your artist has the character traits of a terrier puppy. It was so proud that it made the bone and dragged it all the way home, defending it all the way from other dogs to lay it at its master's feet, to nothing. We do need praise, we do need encouragement, we do need comfort as artists. It does not matter how accomplished you are, it's daunting and damaging to have our work ignored. If no one else is cheering us on, then we must cheer on ourselves with tokens of esteem for the work well done. We must care for our manuscripts, not leave them in shabby stacks where we spill coffee all over them. We must set artist dates and celebrate finishing a new story or finally laying to rest a portrait for the grumpy client from hell who could not be pleased, although the portrait was pleasing to everyone else who saw it. We must actively seek out friends who do not shame us around our discouragement and friends who can celebrate with even the smallest victories. In short, discouragement comes from an experience of stinginess on the part of the critic, a colleague, a friend, our family. Encouragement just as clearly comes from an experience of generosity, ideally from others and ourselves. At its root, discouragement is the decision in favor of stinginess. We are voting that the universe has done its last nice thing for us and that we have come to the bottom of Santa's bag of toys and there is nothing for us. No one will ever be spontaneously nice to us again. And we are certainly not going to point the way ourselves by mustering any authentic or healing compassion for ourselves either. Did you feel that way this week? We know how to stay discouraged when we're discouraged. We know how to choose our best negative friend to call. Most of us have a secret number emblazoned on our consciousness under the heading, dial this number for pain and rejection. Most of us know if we're really feeling bad, we can feel just a little worse by calling it. For most of us, the idea that we can listen to ourselves, trust ourselves, and value ourselves is a radical leap of faith. The idea that we can tell ourselves, hey, you're doing pretty well and so much better than you did last year amounts to a revolution. The possibility that we can trust ourselves, our decisions and our painstaking progress, that this trust might be enough, even admirable, requires that we muster a sprinkling of optimism. Optimism about ourselves and about our chances is an elected attitude. Is it one that you voted for this week? We can choose to believe the best and not the worst. But to do that, we must become conscious of our own negative voiceover and decide to change our mental soundtrack. Optimism is critical to our spiritual health. It is a creative glass of half full or half empty? Have we wasted a decade or two not getting where we would like? Or are we strong and seasoned and facing another couple of decades where at our age and maturity and sheer experience may allow us to actualize areas beyond our grasp when we were younger? It's a matter of perception and faith. The good news and the bad news are that artists are like plants. They can thrive or wither with only a few simple variables. It's hard to kill an artist, but it's very easy to discourage one. All it requires is a certain withholding quality. And that can cast a spell over a very fine piece of work. We all know people who tell us that our dreams are foolish, pie in the sky, whimsy, and that we should be grateful for what recognition we have won and settle for lower creative ceilings than our high-flying dreams require. Those people, she said, have settled themselves and are uncomfortable with anyone willing to continue with substantial risk. Fortunately, we also know people who do not bother to think about the odds or age or anything but the work at hand. Those people are the ones that we must consciously choose to listen to. It is those people that we must take our creative cuts and bruises to for healing. If we are to take heart and go on with our work, then we must take our heart seriously. Did you take your heart seriously this week? We must listen to its pains, and we must bring to it its joys. What were your joys for your heart this week? What did you discover makes your heart joyful? A heart does not need to be told, oh, toughen up. It needs you to plan a little tiny cheering ceremony and execute it. That done, you will find the heart, the courage to work again and to work again well. And that takes us to the first task this week, taking heart. If we're to take heart and encourage ourselves, doesn't that sound nice? We must first find our heart. Our truth lies in what we love, and when we remind ourselves that we have loved and do love, we find our way unerringly back to the place from which accomplishment is possible. Sounds good, huh? So take a pen in hand and number 1 to 50. This is a list of 50 specific and particular things that your heart loves. For example, strawberry and apple crumble, cloud watching, lemon curd, Beatrix Potter drawings, plaid ribbons, silly string, homemade butterscotch pudding, binge watching The Office, long ambling talks with friends, making lists, checking those lists off, putting my hands in clay, having my feet in the sand at the beach. It's almost impossible, she says, to make this list of what our heart loves without concluding that we live in a rich, savoury and enjoyable world where if we just take heart, things are bound to work out well. Did you feel that when you made your list this week? And feel free to share your lists on our social media too. The next part of this exercise is to list 1 to 10 and list 10 examples of creative encouragement that you have either acted on or ignored. Next to those that you've acted on, note the action taken. Next to those you discounted, note the action that could be taken. How did you go with that? And did it inspire you to take further action or to take even more heart with your creativity? Then she talked about integrity. What if we experiment with the idea that creativity is a spiritual and not intellectual transaction? Not long ago, cathedrals were built for the honor and the glory of God. Art and artistry were routinely put to the service of higher realms. Higher realms were routinely credited for the worldly success of creators. Brahm explained, "Straight away the ideas flowed in upon me directly from God. The music of this opera, Madame Butterfly, was dictated to me by God. I was merely instrumental in putting it on the paper and communicating it to the public," Puccini confided. We are an expression of the great Creator, and we in turn are intended to create. It is not mere ego, but our divine birthright to create. We carry creativity within us as surely as we carry our blood, and in expressing it, we express our full humanity, which is far more than than material. When we fail to answer this calling, when we turn aside and listen to voices that deflect us, we are not in alignment with our own nature, nor with what we might call our destiny. Did you fail to answer the calling this week? Did you turn it aside and listen to voices that deflected you this week? I know I did at times. Thank goodness, never in the moment, that my inner artist will throw a tantrum every time I do this. When we're headed in the right direction creatively, we feel a sense of satisfaction in each day's journey. We might not be moving as fast as we wish, but we are moving in the right direction and we do know it. At day's end, we can tote up our TAH DAH list and say, I placed 3 important phone calls. I reached out to check information that I needed. I jotted notes and got a few good paragraphs down. Conversely, when we're not moving in the right direction, we experience a sense of unease. We have a growing sense of being off the beam. Something isn't sitting right with us. We feel stagnant or else stalemated. Sometimes when we're moving in the wrong direction and events pick up velocity, we experience an alarming sense of being out of control. Something is off. We know it, and it is getting more and more off. This is time to step on the brakes. A sense of wrongness will also usually mean something is wrong. Listening to such gut feelings is always worth the time and trouble it takes. When we let God be God and work through us, we experience both a sense of serenity and excitement. We experience integrity, which comes from the word integer, which means whole, unfragmented by doubt or discomfort. When we experience a sense of oneness with God, ourselves, and our fellows, we can safely know that we are in integrity. Did you feel you were in integrity this week? Or were there some places where you needed to pump the brakes this week? Did you feel in ease and flow? Did you tally up your TAH DAHs this week? Or did you have an unnerving feeling that everything was wrong? Fearing the process, fearing our capacity to survive the process, many gifted artists allow discouragement to darken their creative landscape. Of course they do. They may lurk too long in the shadows because they lack support. The support of before, during, and after friends to help them tolerate and to help us tolerate our turn at center stage. If our current culture can be toxic to artists, we need to build up the antibodies to be able to survive that. In my 25 years of teaching, she said, working to unblock damaged artists, it is my experience, she says, that it is not artists that lack quality, but that as a culture, we lack sufficient quality of character to both nurture and appreciate the artists amongst us. Until we fiercely advocate and nurture for ourselves, we feel stifled. Until more of our reticent artists make more art, we risk continuing to believe that the assessments of those who critique but do not create are right. The quality of our artists is not the true issue. The quality of our critical climate is. It is at this point that we must muster our integrity and be honest about what it is we really want. We must take the leap, even the small little hop of faith that moves us slightly towards our dream. This honest motion on our part is what triggers support for our authenticity. Instead of support for a false self, we can no longer comfortably inhabit. But what about the odds? You may catch yourself grasping at straws. Odds are a favored guise of false gods. Odds are the denial of miracles. Odds are faith in being faithless, faith in being hopeless, faith in being stuck where we are, isolated from any power that might overcome the odds. Have you been playing with the odds this week? As we commit ourselves to our real dreams, we commit to ourselves. As we commit to ourselves, we also commit in trusting to the power that created us. Did you do that this week? Did you trust in the power that created you? We are aligning ourselves when we do this, not with the false gods, but with the true power of the universe, the great creator, through whose power all dreams are possible. And that brings us to the next task, which is pat yourself on the back. You've already accomplished many worthy things. It is a good idea to have ready at hand 25 things that you are proud of. This list is where your This list is where you value your own character and put it down in black and white. Some of the things you've done right. It's important in writing this list to place on it what you are actually proud of, not what you should be proud of. So, for example, 1, I'm proud that I taught Dominica to ride a horse. 2, I'm proud that I took her to Sunday pony riding when she was just a toddler. 3, I'm proud I let her ride double with me to get her balance. 4, I'm proud that I signed her up for lessons and stood on the sidelines watching. 5, I'm proud that I stood up for Carolina in religion class. This list goes a long way towards establishing and reigniting and putting us in touch with our integrity. Then she talked about getting back on the horse. We're intended to make something of ourselves. When we feel supported by others, this is a festive feeling. There is a sense of community, a sense of shared purpose and humour, like we're the creative equivalent of a quilting bee or a barn raising. A collective group energy feels firm, exhilarating and fine. We don't wobble because there are helping hands there to steady our ladder as we try to climb. Surrounded by the support, making something and something of ourselves is easy. This is why great summer music camps like Tanglewood and Aspen and Marlborough matter. This is why painting institutes and writing retreats are so valued. All of us need such support. We don't always have this luxury. Sometimes support fails us. Instead of getting help, we are met with hindrance. Sometimes we suffer horrifying creative injury. Our bones may not be broken, but our confidence is. An actress is emotionally disemboweled by a director who makes Hannibal Lecter look like an amateur. A pianist is reviewed by a critic who thinks beat is a musical term meaning to club. Creative cataclysms like these are common. They are dangers of the trail. Artists are sensitive animals and we do get spooked. Certainly the sensitive horse of our talent gets spooked and we may get pitched right off it. I'm never going to try that again, we vow, meaning the novel, the finger-twisting, heart-shredding concerto, the torture rack of the stage. And the longer we don't try it again, the more we convince ourselves that we could never try it again. We say, it hurt me once, and there is one and only one cure for creative injuries, and that is the cure of making something. If we do not make some small something, our injured yet active imagination will make some even bigger deal out of what happened to us. Sometimes the only comfort we can find is in naming ourselves. If no one else will pronounce us an artist, we must say our name to ourselves. And the only way to say it is through art. The bandage must fit the wound. If your musical has been trounced, write some music. If your painting has been pounced on, paint something, even a kitchen chair. If your poetry has had its feet broken, walk into an open mic and read something. A famous director I know well, always conscious that critical reception might curtail his chances to do a large budget work, would remind himself on sleepless nights, if I can shoot 35, I can shoot 16. And if I can't shoot 16, I can shoot Super 8. And if I can't shoot Super 8, I can draw, I can sketch. In other words, he knew his medicine for his creative losses, however huge and catastrophic, lay in the phrase, I can and I will create. And nowadays we all have access to so many great cameras, even just on our phones, right? We are intended to make something of ourselves, and sometimes that making has to be done without palpable support. We feel defeated and deflated by our interpersonal relationships. We feel like people have let us down, and often they truly have. Even more discouraging, we feel that we have let ourselves down. We feel we haven't been smart enough. As artists, she says, she reminds us we have off nights and off years. It is part of the territory. It is arguably a necessary part of the territory. As artists, when human power fails us, we must turn to the great creator for help. We must surrender our sense of isolation and despair and open ourselves to the spiritual help we frequently experience as unexpected inner strength. Let me be clear about one thing. Artists at all levels experience adversity. Some of us quite publicly, some of us quite painful and private. One way or the other, bad colleagues, bad reviews, we fall off the horse. It is a spiritual law that no loss is without meaning in all creation. And so the bitter defection of our creative colleagues who says thanks and then tries to shove us off the ladder, failing to mention our contributions at a press conference, claiming credit for our ideas in staff meetings, is actually somehow a boon to us. Yes, the shove hurts. Oh, also the treachery hurts, and also the disillusionment hurts. But more often than not, we land on a pile of straw. We find our fall mysteriously cushioned. Angels appear. Sometimes we sense them internally as inspiration. The minute we ask, what's next, instead of why me? Because creativity is a spiritual issue, injuries to creativity are spiritual wounds. In my experience, an artist's anguished prayers are always answered by the great Creator. Did you have anguished prayers this week or just anguish? Even as we sob to the fates and rightly, I cannot go on, we are going on. And we are going on with spiritual assistance. Something is stirring, and that means we are already going on. We are gaining ground, first as awareness and next as action. Creativity is a spiritual practice, and like all spiritual practices, it contains the tools of self-inventory. We want colleagues of both talent and character. To find them, we must forge brighter our own talent and our own character. As artists, when we're sold down the river, we must look and see in what ways we are selling ourselves short. Yes, others have been bastards. That is real and irrefutable and painful. What is often more painful is seeing our participation. Usually the spot where we shrank back from trusting ourselves is the very point that the tide turned against us. This does not make other people's foul play our fault. It does not mean that they shouldn't have acted differently or better. What it does mean is that we will act differently and better in the future. That is the part we can change. But the way to change this is not through berating ourselves for our stupidity. It is not by trying to make their flaws our fault. It is not by claiming that we drove them to it somehow. It is by treating ourselves kindly, listening to ourselves gently. It is by telling compassionate people and forces exactly how hurt we are and admitting that we need help to heal. Call your Aunt Bernice and tell her that a critic broke your heart. Write a letter to Oscar Hammerstein II, who endured decades of failure after the success of Showboat, and tell him that you're on a losing streak and does he have any thoughts. Call a college teacher who thinks you're a huge success no matter how you feel right now. Call yourself home to that part of yourself that is strong enough to continue. That is when the help comes. It bubbles up within us, and it enters as lightly as a wind stirring a curtain. There will always be help. As artists, we are engaged always in a collaborative process with the great Creator. Stakes that seem impossibly high to us, castings that feel all wrong, these are when we ask for spiritual guidance, and they may be revealed to be necessary to the plot, important to the growth and the maturation of our own creative process. As artists, it's important to remember that all breaks are lucky breaks because bones are often strongest at the broken place. Art is healing, and artists heal. So is it any wonder then, as artists, when we're in our integrity, when we're telling the story we are meant to tell through our art, that our art is healing because we have been in those places and we have had the courage to heal, the heart to heal, to make those breaks stronger in that part of the bone where the bone was broken once before? Is it any wonder that there's a song that gets us through that most difficult part of the heartbreak, that there's a book we often will pick up that has exactly the right paragraph in there that shed light on the dark place in the forest that we're currently experiencing because that writer has been there before us? If you've experienced insecurity, if you've experienced that you are scared, if you have been wounded on the journey, just know that that is part of your journey, and your courage to keep going with heart lights the path for all of us. And that takes us to the next task this week, which is, ouch, let me make that better. Creative injuries tend to be secret injuries. It shouldn't bother me so much, we say, or I just seem to lose interest after that. We deny to others and to ourselves the devastating impact a creative upset can have on us. We fall down off the horse, and rather than getting back on, we tell ourselves we have lost interest in writing. Unmourned creative injuries create scar tissue. Unmourned, that creative scar tissue is not making the bone stronger. Unmourned, when we tell ourselves to toughen up, the wound festers underneath. I'm just not interested, we say. When we really are very interested indeed, we're just injured. The following exercise is one of compassion and forgiveness. Doesn't that sound so good? Doesn't that feel so good? We deserve compassion for the pain we have suffered due to our creative injury. We deserve forgiveness because we have allowed ourselves to be stopped, stalled, or stymied, and we usually judge ourselves harshly for that. Take a pen in hand. Again, number from 1 to 10. List 10 creative injuries or disappointments you have not allowed yourself to grieve, get through, or get over. Be very careful and gentle with yourself. This is an extremely vulnerable and volatile process. As you review your injury list, look for very small, very gentle steps that you can take to move your artist back towards the arena where the injury occurred. But the steps must be very small. I'm going to read that again. The steps must be very small and very gentle. Let's say, for example, that you wrote a novel and received some encouraging but some discouraging agent letters in response to your manuscript. The first aid might be rereading a positive letter from the first 25 pages of your manuscript. Allow yourself to go slowly and carefully. If you put up a play and receive some savage reviews, you might be avoiding theatre entirely. Get yourself a set of tickets to go to the theatre. In other words, coax your artist out to play and then put your artist straight back to work. How did you go with that exercise? Congratulations. And I'm sorry for your scar tissue. Let's check in on the week now. How many times did you do your morning pages? Did you skip a day or several days? How does the experience writing them for you? Are you experiencing more clarity, a wider range of emotions, a greater sense of detachment, purpose, or calm? Did anything surprise you? Is there anything repeating, nagging you to be dealt with? Did you go on an artist date this week? Did you notice that you are getting an improved sense of well-being from these artist dates? Did you notice how you felt on the artist date? Remember, artist dates can be difficult and you may need to coax yourself to do them. You may need a sandwich call with a fellow artist to get you to go on one. Did you go on your weekly walk? How did that feel? What emotions or insights surfaced for you on your weekly walk? Were you able to walk more than once? What did your walk do for your sense of optimism and perspective? Were there any other issues that you felt were significant to your self-discovery this week? Any synchronicity that popped up for you this week? Any challenges that popped up for you this week? Any breakthroughs that popped up for you this week? We are just completing week 11, guys. Next week is week 12. That's the final week. Week 12 is discovering a sense of dignity. And for our group that meets weekly, just a reminder that week 13, which we always do, this is a 12-week course, but we always do it as a 13-week course because in week 13, we're feeding back on week 12 and our discoveries around a sense of dignity. And then the last half of class, we are sharing something of our own creativity. So get ready for that. Know what you're going to be sharing. If you need any support, if you're going to need access to a power outlet or something like that, let me know so that I can support you. And thank you so much for being on your creative journey and for being part of our community. We love you and we love your authenticity.